gentlemen, welcome back to ICCS.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have an outstanding panel behind us on stage, and this, of course, is for the fireside chat. We're proud to have with us our young community leaders.
And this segment celebrates young leaders who have been actively shaping peaceful and harmonious societies. They will share their personal journeys as well as transformative ideas, highlighting solutions that bring together unity in times of diversity. Now, this aims to build future leaders who will also inspire future leaders to build cohesive and inclusive communities. So you can see that they are right there on stage. Let me introduce you to them. First and foremost, Wendy Makundi, senior producer and host, Our Grandfather Story. Let's give it up for the young people. Next, Naila Mariam Binti Neil Bakri Maso, General Manager, Architects of Diversity. I'm pleased to say the only thorn among the roses, Alex Lowe, Youth Leader, Heart of God Church, Founder, Co-founder and Director, Interfaith.sg. Next, we have Amna bin Amara, Researcher and Consultant in Intercultural Management. Tarina Ahuja, Youth Advocate and Organizer. Moderating this session, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Aaron Maniam, Fellow of Practice and Director, Digital Transformation, Blavatnik School of Government, University of Oxford.
And ladies and gentlemen, we do know you will have questions. QR code is on the screen right now. Please whip out your phones and, of course, jump onto the bandwagon to set your questions, all for Aaron to moderate as well. Aaron, over to you for this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for being here, on time, full of energy. I don't know how impressive you realize this is, right? That there's this kind of a turnout on day 3 of a conference when a lot of people are still jet lagging. So kudos to all of you for being here. Thanks for joining us. It is going to be a wonderful panel. I had the privilege of meeting the team. We call ourselves the team now, earlier on in the week, and I'm so excited about the wisdom and insights that they will be sharing with us. So you can tell that this is going to be a slightly different format, right, compared to some of the earlier panels. Mona mentioned already that she was moving into a more conversational kind of tone and approach, and we are going even more conversational now. We've actually done away with the lectern, because these guys need no lectern to look wonderful and be impressive. So I asked them to start, right, by sharing a little bit about themselves. Diana's done some wonderful introductions already, and you know what they do. But let's hear a bit more about them, right? What makes them tick, what makes them special? So I've asked them to tell me something, or tell us something, that's not already in their bio. And we're going to start with our guests, right, from outside of Singapore. So Amna, you come to us and join us here from Tunisia. Tell us something that's not in your bio.
Thank you so much, Aaron. So, I did not choose where I come from, neither did any of you. But sometimes our context, our background, our accent, and mainly our nationalities and passports can feel like a kind of a prison. Of course, not a prison with bars, but one made of invisible walls and barriers that are built by assumptions, stereotypes, prejudices, and misconceptions. My name is Amna bin Amara, and I come from Tunisia, or I would rather say actually Tunisia, because so many of you would confuse it with Indonesia, and this happens so often. So I'm not saying this to simply introduce myself, but as a reminder of how these details can easily shape the way people perceive us, often without we've even said a single word. Of course, this is not about turning our backs on who we are or ignoring our roots. It's about something quieter, yet as heavy. It's about how our identities are filtered, judged, misrepresented, and even misunderstood. And it's about how things like where we come from, who we are, what we look like, and what our documents say can become lenses people see through. So this does not deny the fact that I usually, and I always actually proudly say that I'm a 100 made in Tunisia student. So I grew up there, I studied there, and later I became a teacher there. And until I was 27, I had never left my country. So my first international experience actually was through a scholarship that I received as a visiting researcher to one of the French universities. And funny enough, back then I had no plans to join the field of intercultural communication. I was just a researcher in cultural studies more generally. But I found myself taking with me all of my notes and books that I had on the subject. So, I don't know, maybe deep down something in me knew that I was already heading in that direction. And so I did, actually.
Great. So you're a researcher. And I would never say someone is just a researcher, by the way. A researcher in intercultural studies.
Yeah, and I'm a
who delves deep.
practitioner as well. Yeah, a researcher and a practitioner in the field of intercultural communication, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Amna.
Welcome.
Tarina, you join us from the United States. Tell us one thing about you that we don't already know from your bio.
Yeah, first of all, it's so wonderful to be here, and thank you all for your hospitality in this beautiful country. My name is Tarina Ahuja, and the best thing to tell you about who I am that's not in my bio is that I am a product of generations of women who have molded the path that I stand on today. Every week growing up, I would sit at our family's dinner table, and there was an emblematic mixture of food. There was Persian crispy rice, tehdig. There was Indian spinach curry, saag. There was Pakistani semolina pudding, kheer. And all of that really shows who I am. The Indian curry, emblematic of my Punjabi roots, sprung from ancient lands. The Persian crispy rice is emblematic of what my mom brought to the United States after fleeing war and religious persecution. The Pakistani semolina pudding was ladled by sympathetic pots into my great-grandmother's hands as she was escaping partition. And so that is who I am, that is what I embody. And on a bit more of the lighter side, I actually, being a very mediocre cook, co-authored a cookbook with my grandmother, my nani, fulfilled of all of these recipes because my one wish from her when I was 16 years old was to put together a cookbook of all of her recipes, Iranian, Indian, Pakistani, Indo-Chinese. And so while I've done a lot of things in the world of youth organizing and advocacy, that is probably one of my proudest accomplishments.
Wonderful. I love how you're all already in, kind of lacing comments about social cohesion, diversity, multiculturalism into even your introduction. So I can see Kumar taking notes now about the panel on food that is going to be at the next ICCS that we do in 2 or 3 years' time. Neela, over to you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Neela. I'm from, I know you're not supposed to say something from our bios, but I need to put context.
That's fine. Go ahead.
So I work for an organization in Malaysia called Architects of Diversity, and we work in the realm of building an ecosystem for racial and religious inclusion in Malaysia. And why this is an important point is because I don't actually have a background in public policy, in international law, or anything relevant to my current work. I actually studied creative writing. So I'm a writer, I write poems, and I'm currently in this phase where I'm like, I don't know my personal voice anymore, so I used to have published work, but I keep things to myself, so I'm a very private writer now. Because now my voice is used for something even larger than myself, which is to champion social cohesion in Malaysia. And that was the reason why I joined the organization in the first place. It was to tackle something that was challenging and something that people don't actually, it's not a first choice for many people to tackle something so difficult. But I wanted to take this challenge for myself to test my limits as a writer, like how much am I able to write about something so difficult in a scene that is sensitive and like, yeah, social cohesion is very delicate. When you say the wrong thing, it could fracture things. And so, yeah, I wanted to challenge myself and address racial divides in Malaysia. And I realized that multiculturalism is thriving, it's very much alive in Malaysia, but it takes an active involvement and active engagement to actually do something. And that's what I've committed to in my career. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you, Neela. We're always happy to welcome a fellow poet and creative writer here as well. I am, at least, and so I shall speak on behalf of me at this point. We come now to the two Singaporeans on the panel, two of our homegrown wonders here. And I love that between the two of them, they represent not everything about Singapore, but a good amount of the diversity that is at work in this little island that we all call home. Wendy, we'll come to you first, if that's right. Tell us something that's not in your bio that you'd like us to know.
Yes, okay. Hi, my name is Wendy, and don't be deceived by my African outlook. I'm really very Singaporean on the inside. It's just a disguise for my Singaporean nature. So just want to say, if you close your eyes and listen to me speak for the rest of the panel, I'm quite Singaporean lah. It's there. Yeah, so just a background, I'm from East Africa, Tanzania. I came to Singapore when I was 2 years old, so I grew up in Singapore, went through the whole local system, and now I'm working in a local media company called Our Grandfather's Story, and there we tell stories of overlooked, authentic stories of human-centric stories of Singaporeans amongst our midst. So, just a little fun fact about myself. In 2 years, I have worked 24 jobs. So how does that happen, you might ask? From cemeteries to cruise ships to surgery rooms and Michelin star restaurants, you name it, I've probably tried it. And if you want to know more, you can ask me after this session. Yeah, that's where I'll leave it at. Yeah.
So your next challenge will be 24 jobs in one day. Right? Cram all of that in as well. Stretch target there. But thank you very much, Wendy. And we'll come to Alex now.
Yeah, I'm Alex. I'm from Heart of God Church here in Singapore, and I'm also co-founder of Interfaith SG. So actually what the bio won't tell you is that I'm also actually currently a student, and I love that the past few days we've been talking a lot about history, because that's actually what I major in. I love history, and I think later there might be a bit of a chance for me to talk about that as well. But firstly, thank you, ICCS. This has been great. It's been great to meet so many of my new old friends that I saw at ICCS in 2022. And as the Singaporean on the panel, I have to tell you that there will be test questions at the end of this, and we'll be passing out the test papers later.
Okay, I did not know this either.
Now you know. Yeah. I'm just kidding. But what you will not know is that actually I really love music, and I love what happened on the first day when all the different instruments came together. Outside of this, I play guitar, and if you know, you will find I'll be on Ableton as well, here now and then. So that's about me.
Cool. Thank you, Alex. And we did toy with the idea of having Alex do his entire set of sharings with the guitar, but we thought that it might be just a little too much stress on the poor AV team. So again, we'll save that for next round, Kumar and team. So if you don't mind, we'll save that for 2 years from now. Wendy, you mentioned stories, right? And how you work a lot with stories. And this is where I wanted to turn the conversation next. Because fundamentally, we humans are storied creatures, right? We understand ourselves partly through the stories we tell ourselves. We become the stories we tell ourselves. We take inspiration and we draw our sense of identity from the stories that we were told. And what I was hoping we could all do at this stage is to do a bit of sharing on a particularly positive story about your work in social cohesion that you would like to share with the rest of us, right? To tell us a story. So not just the headlines that you might put into a PowerPoint slide, but the rich story, right? Who was involved, what happened, what was the drama, and how did the story unfurl? We'll go in reverse order this time. So Alex, why don't you start us off?
All right, so I started doing interfaith work when I was 16. I'm 23 now. But my church, Heart of God Church, had been partnering and sending teams to partner with neighboring mosques and temples. And over the last 10 years, we've ran 145 interfaith events. Many stories have come out of this. In fact, last week, we just ran our 7th interfaith blood donation drive. So if you saw me taking more food, that's because I need to get my iron up after donating blood. So those events, there have been so many events, so many great memories, so many great friends that I've made. But if you were to ask me the most memorable one, it actually didn't happen at one of these events. In fact, it happened in a moment of tension. And I'm glad that you brought up drama, tension, headlines. Because 4 years ago, I was in Khalid Mosque with a team of youths from my church together with the mosque, and we were planning for interfaith initiatives together. And that was when all our phones buzzed at the same time, and the same headline came out from the local news agency. A 16-year-old Protestant Christian youth had been detained for planning to attack 2 mosques in Singapore. Oh my gosh, here we were in a mosque with our Muslim friends that another Christian had just planned to attack their place of worship. My heart went out to my Muslim friends, what were they feeling right now? What were they thinking? And for me, what hit even harder was that he was just 16 years old. That was the age I was when I started doing interfaith work. And here we were planning to do something to bring different faiths together, yet someone out there was planning to tear it apart. So what did we do? Immediately, we stopped the meeting and we told our Muslim friends, hey, even the thought of violence goes against our faith. We don't condone this. And I'm so glad that their response was that They were comforted that we were standing with them and that they knew that this was an isolated incident. You know, outside of that meeting, at every level of my church, my pastors, board members, even my friends were reaching out to their friends from the mosque with same messages of unity and solidarity. Even in that moment of tension, our friendship was stronger. But you know, for the few of us at the mosque, we were just 18 and 19. We wanted to go further than that. We wanted to make a stand for what we believe in, that Christians and Muslims can have strong friendships, and that interfaith harmony isn't just possible, it is happening. So what my Muslim friend Iman and I did was that we wrote a joint letter to the Straits Times as a show of solidarity between Christian and Muslim youths. Young people have a voice, and we wanted to use ours to put out a different headline from what was currently on the news. So in the letter, we shared how we didn't just do interfaith work together, but that we were real friends outside of it. We would play football together, we would catch up over coffee together. And I'm just so glad that even in that moment, something good could come out of it. So if you'd ask me, why is this my favorite moment? Why is this the most memorable moment? It is because this moment showed me that youth have a voice, and youths can make a difference. We didn't just sit there and allow the headlines to affect us, but we decided to do something and make a difference.
Yeah, I think those of us involved in youth ministry also realize that youth are not just one voice, right? They are the future of all of this work that we're trying to do, whether within our communities or outside and in how our communities actually come together. So thanks Alex, for sharing that.
Thank you.
Wendy, let's come to you. What's your favorite story that you want to share?
Yes, okay, so I'm going to share a little bit of background, actually, of how I came to do what I do in OGS. So I shared with you earlier, I came to Singapore when I was about 2 years old, and my dad was working here. I have siblings as well, so we all grew up in Singapore. Went through the whole Singapore system, the whole 9 years. My brother did NS, all that fun stuff. Yes. So here, I think what's interesting, or the perspective that I feel that I would provide is, because I'm African, growing up in Singapore, and it's almost like a product of what our multicultural society has done, and how that shaped my, in the end, entering a field of work that will also promote this as well. So it was interesting for me, I think, growing up, like here you don't just live, or you don't just talk about multiculturalism, you live it, you breathe it, and it's almost so natural. Like you don't really see it, and it's so easy to take for granted as well, because it's so normal here in Singapore. So, but even then, I think things were not the easiest as well. I remember that growing up, I even had times where I was told that I didn't belong, because not just because of my skin color or even my grades or effort, but it was because my roots didn't start in the right soil. So I remember being told having that feeling that, oh, you didn't belong in this place. But it was interesting for me because my parents wanted to raise us somewhere safe and provide us opportunities, which was in Singapore. So I realized I was facing this dilemma of that I had to keep trying to prove that I belonged here, even when you get told you don't. So you start to wonder, where do I really belong? And right around COVID was when actually a lot of things started to make sense for me. So out of boredom, my siblings and I, we actually started making videos documenting our journey in Singapore. So we started recreating funny stories, encounters, and times when the hawker aunties will ask us, 你的头发真的假的, and then I have to turn to her and say, 是真的. For context or translation, you're asking me whether my hair is real, and I had to tell them it's real. So
that was a really good flex, by the way. Well done. Yeah.
Yeah, so we started making a lot of videos on that, and we realized that those videos started to do well online. And honestly, we weren't trying to go viral. We were just trying to tell the story of how we grew up in Singapore. And but then people started connecting with it. So we realized that Singaporeans were saying, wow, this is my childhood. And then there were people abroad that looked at our videos and said, oh, this is what life in Singapore is like. And then there were Singaporeans abroad who also missed home that said, wow, this reminds me of home. So we realized that, or rather this reminded me of this quote that Trevor Noah said, which was, language is more powerful than skin color in building connections. So maybe I didn't look like you, but if I spoke like you, I was you. So this made me realize that my language and the language that I speak, which was humor, through the videos that I do, that was what helped to bridge connections, and that was what helped to actually push me into starting my videos online, doing media, and humor became my way of connecting as well, because laughter is universal, right? Who doesn't like a good laugh? Yeah. But I'm not here to do stand-up, so, and I'm not here to, make jokes, but I just want to say that humor is the gentle honesty that the world didn't know it needed. And it was interesting for us because here we are, 3 African kids, just messing around with the camera, recreating funny moments, and somehow people saw themselves in it. People laughed, they related, and they shared it. And for us, it was heartwarming because for the first time, people weren't just accepting our differences, they were actually embracing it. So that feeling, that power to connect with people through media actually sparked something in me. That was when I decided that, okay, that stories is what I want to tell, and stories are powerful in telling those values as well.
Lovely.
Yeah.
There's a thinker in the UK called David Goodhart who writes a lot about whether you belong somewhere, anywhere, or nowhere, right? Depending on how broad your identity might be. And you strike me as someone who could refine his theory and belong everywhere, actually, through the stories that you tell. And so we should think about how we refine some of those ideas, actually, even further. Neela, let's come to you next. What's your favorite story?
Yeah, my favorite story is actually from work. I mean, for a long time, I think working for my organization has been a big part of my life, and how I define myself, which is, people say you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't define yourself by your work, but I'm sorry, it's just so great. It's just so cool. Yeah. But anyway, my story is about one of our camps that we had for high school kids. We gathered a bunch of kids from different backgrounds in Malaysia, all around Malaysia, and we teach them, well, not teach them, we facilitate spaces where they get to explore about identity, diversity, and inclusion. And the product from that is that they become change makers themselves. And at the end of the camp, there is this part where we do like a gratitude circle. So we go around. There's like 40 of us in a room, and each of us get to say something, a reflection or a learning, as a closing remarks for the camp. And at that point, I felt, before that, I was like, oh, this work is really tough, civil society is so messy and so unpredictable. You have to keep up with political uncertainties, so it was very tiring. So when I came into that camp, I was like, okay, this is another program that we have to do. But at that moment, that closing circle, I could hear to everyone's reflections about how the program impacted them, and it actually became very emotional to the point where some of them were crying, some of them were sharing about their own personal experiences, and a lot of them talked about how the camp provided them space to connect with people who they've never had opportunities to talk to before, and they actually got to be friends and learn about their backgrounds. And some of the group was like, oh yeah, peace out guys, I'm gonna, thanks, okay, thanks, bye. But there were a large amount of youth who said that they cherished the time they spent together. They were in the camp for 5 days. So yeah, we trapped them, no phones, and so they got to interact with each other. And I thought at a moment, I was like, okay, you know what? This is where the magic is. And it's something that is a memory that is very vivid in my mind. I could still remember the faces that were sharing their reflections and emotions. And I use that as a motivation in my work sometimes. And I thought at that point, you know what? This is a reason worth staying for. In this line of work.
There's an old saying in diversity work that you don't explain away differences, but people can experience the differences and then find new ways to look at them. And it sounds like the camp was a really wonderful example of that. Great. Tarina, tell us about your favorite story.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for some context on myself, the work that I do, my North Star, is really trying to think about what does it mean to get young people involved in the work of advocacy, involved in the work of justice. And so that's taken many forms. It's taken the form of mentoring young women and building projects of service, what we call in the Sikh faith seva, selfless service. It's looked like organizing youth of different faith backgrounds and racial backgrounds for social justice within the United States. It's looked like teaching youth how to write policy and pass policy in cities and states and even federally. But the story I want to share actually has to do with none of that. It has to do with something separate. And for a moment, would you raise your hand if you've ever seen the news and felt helpless, like you didn't know what to do?
Every day.
Yep, it looks like just about everybody. And that was a moment that was striking for me in 2018. It was, for me, I was 16 years old, and I remember doing things that all 16-year-olds do in the summer. I was hanging out with friends, I was studying for tests, I was finding good food. But there was one particular day when I turned on the news, and we saw the news of family separation being streamed across our screens. Family separation at the US border. And what that looked like were pictures of young kids who were in prison cells, basically put right next to each other with tinfoil blankets. We saw pictures and videos of mothers and fathers who were calling out for their children. And it was a moment where, in the States and in what echoed across the world, we were seeing a level of inhumanity that made so many of us feel helpless. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know what to say. We didn't know how to act. And I remember thinking to myself, I was sitting in my room and just feeling this overwhelming sense of sadness, of pain, thinking about the stories of my family, of people who came here after really difficult situations in home countries. I thought of my community. And I realized that, there wasn't much that we could do to change the policy, but something we could do was make our voices heard, bring people together. And so I called a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, and a few of us decided to plan a demonstration. And this demonstration was beautiful. It was called the Rally to Reunite. We brought people together of different faith backgrounds to share their sentiments and speeches. We brought musicians who came together and were able to provide song and art to bring folks together. And we provided space for us to all quite literally interlock our hands and be in solidarity. But to me, the most moving moment of that experience was when a woman came up to me, and I could tell that she was nervous about being there, but she kind of ran up to me and whispered in my ear. She said, "Gracias," or "thank you," and then she ran away. And to me, what was so striking about that was that it kind of reframed how I see cohesion. I think often we see it in the big, flashy moments, in the programs and the movements, but to me, it was that small moment that showed that cohesion is gestures of care. Cohesion is making sure that people feel seen and comforted. Because in order for us to come together, in order for us to build more, in order for us to build progress, that human connection is important. Yep. Those conversations are important. And I think it was really just locking arms with her, that woman, and being able to say, "Hey, I'm here for you." It was that showed me that cohesion comes in the smallest moments as well as the largest moments. And the momentum didn't end there. We continued to work within our community to think about how we support members of our community that were vulnerable and hurting. And of course, we are thinking about that today just as much. But it was seeing a community come together. It was seeing a community rise. And it was seeing a community make sure that our neighbors felt like they weren't alone in a moment of deep pain.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Tarina. And I would even push this further to say that it's not that the smallest moments, are as important as the big ones. They are the big moments, actually. It's those moments of care that become those that loom large in our memory and in the stories that we end up telling. Amna, last but by far from least, what's your story that you'd like to tell?
Actually, I have so many stories, and I kindly request from you to give me enough time so that I mention at least most of them, because I believe they are important not only for me, but for the broader audience to be aware of as well. So when introducing myself, I stopped at the point saying that I had no plans to work in the field of intercultural communication. But I did, actually. So it all started when I moved to France. So one day, a message popped up on LinkedIn. It was from George Simons, an expert in the field of intercultural communication, offering me a traineeship in his organization, Diversify, the game of cultural competence. And that message changed my life, actually. So today, George Simons is my mentor, my source of inspiration, and one of the major reasons I stepped into the field of intercultural communication, not only as a researcher, but also as a practitioner delivering workshops and training programs. So to be fair, as I said, actually, I studied in intercultural communication years ago as part of my first MA in cultural studies, but I did not fully grasp the real-world implications of intercultural communication until I traveled for the first time. So for me, it was fascinating. It was something totally new, enriching, and exciting as a course. But what happened? I remember it very vividly, actually. I was in the line for passport check, and there were two lines. One for French and EU citizens, and another line for non-EU travelers. And there was a 6-year-old boy, and he pointed at us, and he asked his father, I was close enough to hear the question, and he said, Dad, why are they checking their passports? And the father answered loudly, because they are terrorists. That word stuck, honestly. It still rings in my ear till this day. Of course, I'm not making generalizations here, but at that day I found myself asking, what am I doing here? How can I live in a place where my very presence is seen with suspicion? As I said, I'm not making any generalizations, but my first intercultural encounter was a bit painful. It wasn't the warm, open dialogue I was hoping for. It was something totally new, as you saw. And this led me actually to write an article entitled The Ethics of Representing the Other, From Backstage to Front Stage Racism, where I aimed to explain how public discourse is slowly shifting, and how the boundaries of what can be said about the other and the boundaries of acceptable discourse are pushed even further and are stretching dangerously wide. Around that time, also, I started being in touch with so many professionals and experts in the field of intercultural communication, attending conferences and events and presenting all over the place. And I was surprised again. Because in each and every event and conference I attended, I was asking the same questions and saying the same things. This does not reflect my experience. Where do I stand in this? Why do I feel like I'm spoken for and not spoken with? So for me, it was like a perfectly designed map, except for the fact that my country wasn't on it. So I believe that this points to a deeper problem of representation, because as we all know, not only in intercultural communication or inclusion issues, in so many other fields like academia or education, dominant voices and approaches often dictate the narrative, making knowledge more of a monologue, a top-down approach that is detached from the lived experiences of so many communities and from the challenges that people are experiencing on the ground. So we've been hearing so many calls in this conference and elsewhere about the importance of knowledge. I confirm that's true. But what I would add is that the source of knowledge is as important as knowledge itself. Because what we see today is that knowledge in each and every field, not only in intercultural communication, is seen as a one-way transfer from those who are more powerful and influential to those with less power and influence, or simply from the global north to the global south, though I hate this distinction, honestly, because it's very socially constructed and it's very division-oriented, I would say. But that's true. So the real challenge today is how to bring both actors into real and mutable conversation. I will tell you a very funny story. So I actually, as someone who has done extensive research on the discursive and cultural construction of the Middle East in Western political discourse, I have been actively applying for research positions in think tanks and universities. And of course, apart from my expertise, because I'm finalizing my PhD on that, I always emphasize the fact that I bring first-hand knowledge on the topic. So I know the region, I know the culture, I know the context. So I believe that this is something very important to bring in and to emphasize. So far, it did not seem to work. So maybe hopefully in the future. So back to the topic, actually. And as I said, the more I engage in in this field, the more questions I ask. And one day, when I had to renew my visa and go through the visa process, the weight of these questions hit me truly, actually. So I found myself, again, questioning so many basics. Like, for example, the concept of global citizenship. We have so many courses today, so many initiatives on global citizenship. But what do we mean by this concept? Now, if we define global citizenship as something about doing, that is traveling, moving across cultures and experiencing and communicating with different peoples and from different cultures and backgrounds, then I would say that this is not something that is accessible to all people around the globe. It's a privilege and sometimes even a buzzword. Because for so many people, like me, or people from the Global South again, mobility is not a given, it is a struggle. And here lies the real contradiction, because while we promote global citizenship as one way to foster inclusion and mutual dialogue, the very structures and systems in which we exist do totally the opposite. They discriminate, they exclude, and they even question the legitimacy of so many communities today. So this is why, for those who are familiar with my approach, I always call for a critical understanding of intercultural communication, one that moves beyond the feel-good slogans and touches upon the histories and the long histories of omissions, exclusions, and oppressions that have been constantly produced and reproduced. Because if we want to move forward, then we have to look backward first. We have to understand our histories, heal from our traumas and our previous experiences, and create reconciliation so that we can move forward. Thank
Brilliant.
you.
Amna, thank you. I know you asked for a little bit more time, and what was really lovely in that is that you were telling not just a single story, as you said, that you would like to share, but also stories about turning points, right? Things that kind of really shaped what you were before and how that transformed into something new in the new approaches that you were taking, the motivations, the fundamental drives that you felt. And that was actually going to be my next question to the group, right? What were the big turning points that kind of led you to where you are now, to all these awesome things that you're all doing, right, in your different locations? What were the major turning points that have got you here? Maybe let's go and we'll just keep going around the room there. So we'll come to you next, Tarina.
Yeah, so for me, the turning point was a moment in 2012 in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. It was essentially, to set the scene, I was in my home and my parents called me to their room. I was 10 at the time, so I was very young. And we sat down together. They turned on the news and explained to me that a Sikh Gurdwara, or a Sikh place of worship, had been the subject of a mass shooting, and 6 people had been murdered during that shooting. And again, I was so young, and I was trying to grasp the gravity of what was happening. And I noticed, I looked at the screen, I saw images of Sikh men and women, and thought to myself, that was the very first time I had seen Sikh men and women on a screen, on a television screen, and this was the circumstance. I remember feeling incredibly confused. I remember feeling incredibly sad. And I remembered feeling like, you know, what was the point of this? What was the reason that somebody would feel so much hate that the only thing that they thought they could do was to bring a gun into a place of worship? And I think that was a moment that set off something in my head. But I remember the week that followed, we were attending vigils. We were attending vigils in our community where we were seeing this beautiful fabric of what I think cohesion means. We saw people show up for us. We saw Christians in our community bring us food. We saw Muslims in our community start fundraising resources for those in the Sikh community to feel safe. We saw messages of solidarity, and neighbors from the Jewish community show up and be with us. We saw people who didn't identify with the faith community come to our Gurdwara and tell us that they were there, that we were their neighbors, that we were their community, and that they would not forget us, they would not leave us alone. And I thought that that was really magical. This idea of when we're met with the most dangerous, the most pernicious divisions that humanity can experience, we can also be met with the connection of people who come together with the faith in humanity that we all have. A really important moment for me within all of this. And of course, I didn't understand it at the time. I was so young. This was something that started to come as I studied what had happened, as I started to look back on it and reflect on it, as I started to do this work and get involved in my community. But it was a moment actually at Oak Creek when the shooting had happened. Some of the leaders of the Gurdwara had decided to leave the bullet in the wall. And a lot of people had questions. Why was this happening? Why would you leave the bullet in the wall? Why would you have a reminder of that trauma, of that pain? But the leader of the Gurdwara, who I've now come to know, he said, well, the reason is we need this reminder here, and we need a plaque underneath it that says, we are one. So that as we go forward, we have this reminder to ourselves that we are all one, that we are all part of this global community. And the we are one, the oneness, comes from the people that showed up for us. The oneness also comes from this idea that we must pray and work to build a world and an infrastructure where this hate is diminished, where we're building the types of bonds and the types of societies and the types of social safety nets that would ensure that no one would ever feel the need or the urge to show up and do something like this ever again. And so since then, that has framed my work. What does it mean to be a person of moral courage, a person of moral imagination? What does it mean to extend my hand and think about working with other communities, to what Alex said in this idea of building connections with people to make sure that not only are people showing up for our community, but that our community is showing up for other communities. Yeah. And within all of this, we're continuously thinking about not just on an interpersonal level, but on an institutional level, how do we build a society that we can be proud of, a society that makes sure that hate does not get embedded in the ground roots of who we are as a people. And that's been the jumping off point of all the work that I've done.
Thank you very much, Tarina. I'll be remembering that story about the bullet in the wall for a very, very long time, I think. Wendy, let's come to you.
Yes, okay. So just to share a little bit of context, I think the work that I do at Our Grandfather's Story involves me talking to a lot of different people, and oftentimes I meet people from different walks of life, different faiths, different races. So I remember this story. This was quite a pivotal moment for me when I was just a new producer and a host. So I've only been interviewing people for about 4 months, and I remember going into this shoot, which was slightly challenging for me because to set the scene, this was actually the moment that caused me to see how I could see human connection differently. So what it was I was speaking to this person who was from a different spiritual belief and background from myself. So we came from, I wouldn't say opposing views, but we came from different backgrounds. And then I had to learn how to navigate that conversation. And that video, we were trying to understand some of his values and his thoughts. And my role there, as per the director, was to sort of like challenge some of his notions. And I remember when we were talking, our conversations were quite intense, and it really got quite tense, the conversation. And there was one point where I asked him a question about something to do with what he shared a statement, and I was asking a question about it. And then he kind of answered with this quiet resignation. And then at a moment, I took a step back and it hit me, like, I'm trying to, like, what was the point of this interview? Like, am I trying to fight him on his beliefs? Am I trying to, like, what is the end point? Yeah, so I realized that regardless of whether I believed, or rather whether I agreed with him or not, the journey that he went through, the motivations, the pain, all that was still real, and he still went through all that. That's his journey that he went through. So at that point, I realized arguing wasn't going to move the conversation forward, but trying to understand why he feels that way, what are his motivations, that was the point that I could make. So in the end, I spoke with the director, we turned the interview around a little bit, and what surprised me, I think, at the end of the interview was beneath our differences in our beliefs, we all shared that same idealism in wanting to help people. Yeah, so, and it was interesting for me because our methods look very different. It would not be something that I would do personally, but because the underlying values that are still universal values that we all believe in, which is to help people, like our compassion and hope, often these underlying values are what we don't see, and it lies between even the most opposing views as well. Yeah, so I realized that those values are the ones that makes connection possible as well. And also, another learning was like tension doesn't mean disconnection. Yeah, so we can have tough conversations, and I think sometimes tough conversation allows us to connect and draw something deeper that we need to talk about as well. Yeah, so, and actually shared purpose can exist across differences as well. So we can have opposing views, we can have different beliefs, but at the same time, there is a common goal to help people to achieve hope, to achieve compassion in that conversation. Yeah, and I realized that shared idealism became the bridge that helped us to connect. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for that, Wendy. Neela, let's come to you, and then we'll get to Alex after that.
All right. My turning point actually happened in the middle of my career in civil society, and it was a post-COVID time, and funding was unstable, and so my organization was affected. We almost closed shop. We almost had to close, and so I made the decision to leave the organization because I had to sustain myself as a young person in a big city. I actually moved away from my hometown for work, and so I had to sustain myself. It was a sad time, but I tried to be resilient and tried to apply for jobs that were actually outside of civil society. So I tried corporate, I tried going back into the arts, but I applied for the jobs, but I didn't feel like I wanted to work in that scene. There was something still pulling me back into the civil society world, despite it being so challenging, and so it was an entire map that I had to learn with my friends who are also young people. So I feel like it's because once you've seen what civil society reveals, the gaps, the truths, it's really hard to just put it at the back of my mind and be an outside person. And so I started applying for jobs in civil society. Hey, I'm coming back, I guess. Funding is unpredictable and unstable, but I want to just keep on doing this work. And thankfully, my current organization, funding became stable again, so I came back. I followed the money. I followed where the money goes, but my heart was still in for the good work, because I felt like it was very strange, coming from a creative writing background and an arts background, to learn on the job about racial and religious inclusion. But it's really funny how I feel like it resonates really deeply in me, that I feel like there's a bone in my body that is built for this kind of work. And so, that's a turning point.
I love that. And thanks for the reminder that it is not contradictory to both follow the money and follow your heart, when we can find the right combinations here. Alex.
My turning point, how I started, actually also begins at Khalid Mosque. Great stories seem to come from Khalid Mosque. Great biryani definitely comes from Khalid Mosque. My Singaporean
and the two may well be related. Biryani and turning points are very often connected.
So this was also in 2018, and I was also 16, the same. And it was actually at Interfaith Blood Donation Drive at Khalid Mosque as well. I heard about it in my church. My pastor shared that we want to build bridges, not walls. And that's why we are co-organizing a joint Interfaith Blood Donation Drive together. So I was only 16 then. It was actually the minimum age to donate blood. I didn't have a lot of money. I wasn't co-founder of anything. I didn't have a lot of skills. So I only knew that I had 2 good arms and a lot of blood to give. So that's what I did that day. I went to Khalid Mosque and I donated blood. And it was great, It was my first time actually donating blood, and also my first time in a mosque. But it was really what I saw that day that I took away, more than just the biryani in my stomach. It was seeing Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, and Hindus lining up together, serving together side by side. And I realized something simple but profound that day. Underneath every skin, we all bleed the same color, red. You know, a Chinese blood can save a Malay life. A Hindu blood can save a Christian life. And like what Wendy said, you know, we may have our differences, but we all want to do something. And I saw that how we, even though we came from different religions, we all wanted to make a difference together. You see, since these interfaith blood donation drives have begun, we've run 7, we've collected over 240 liters of blood. In turn, that saves over 1,600 lives. But that's never what I remember about interfaith blood donation drives. I always remember the friends that I served together with, the friend on my right and left that may not be the same faith, may not be from the same race, but we did something together. It was the common ground that we found, and that sparked my conviction to want to do interfaith work. Because what I saw that day showed that when we unite in our differences, we can make a difference, and that's why I do interfaith work.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And can I just say to all 5 of you, thank you so much for, as you're doing the sharing, right? It's easy on a panel like this to share the simple stuff, right? To share the feel-good stories, but all of you went for the difficult things, and I am so grateful to you for doing that, because I think in doing that, you have not only shared insights with us, you've also opened up spaces for others to bring in their difficulties, their vulnerabilities and frustrations, even as they deal with the optimistic and opportunity-based sides of a lot of this work. So thank you so much for being so deep in the responses to this first half of the conversation. What I wanted to do next is shift styles a little bit and do a bit of rapid-fire questions with the group. And then we'll come to your questions. There's some really wonderful questions already coming in, so thank you very much for those. And I wanted to start with this, right? What is unique about being a young person in this work, but also working with and for and dealing with young people in this whole process? There's a lot of questions about this. So let me just recite a few of them right here. Adam, who is an imam and youth development worker in Birmingham in the UK, talks about the difficulty of being relatable to young people, right, in a fast-changing Western society for his community. And how do you recommend better engaging a group like this? Others have asked, Cheng has asked, how do you connect with youth or others who may be indifferent about social cohesion or inclusion? What's worked for your organization in getting more youths involved in their overall question? So let's take these 2. There's a couple of others as well. Let me just recite one of them, right? This is one of my favorites. So John has asked, what are some unique considerations when youth lead efforts to strengthen cohesion? What do people need to understand about working with young people that you think is key? Now, Wendy and Neela, I know you both have some thoughts about this. Let's start with you, and the other 3, feel free to jump in. Then we'll take some rapid-fire questions after that for the rest of them. Yeah.
Yes, okay. I think as you were sharing the questions, right, the first thing that came to mind was this thing I learned, which is with young people, be interested. So be interested in their lives, be interested in the things that they're doing, be interested in what they have to think, what they have to say. Oftentimes, I think young people feel like they are not heard or they are not understood, but it's also on us to reach out and find that way to connect with them. So here, I wanted to share at least the point of media, which is a very powerful tool. It's actually quite I know a lot of the past few days we talked a lot about how to do things in the government level, the corporate level, a lot of laws, policies in place, which is amazing and great. But at the same time, I realized that media is also a soft influencer, a soft power that can be used to influence minds, shape cultures, shift cultures as well. So storytelling like this helps actually to shift cultures and shift and actually steer the souls of society as well. So I know that we don't have the best sentiment about the media industry, like with the news it's perpetuating, with a lot of negative aspects there right now. But young people nowadays are not just consumers of it, but I do feel like there is untapped potential in terms of how creative they are to basically speak on things that they want to speak on. Yeah, and I've noticed that with our grandfather's story, the stories that we do, oftentimes I'm like, do young people care about what's going on in the community? Do young people care about this thing? Do young people care? I realize actually young people do care. People do watch, people do listen, people do want to know all these, young people do actually want to know and do want to make a change. And I think we're living in a time where at least in Singapore, where our forefathers have pioneered, our parents have built, and right now we get to create as well. So we're in this time where we get to create, so we should empower young people to use media for a good influence. So I do think that be interested in their lives. Media is powerful, and young people are consumers of it. They know how to navigate it, so we should learn how to like empower them and let them run things.
So be interested, and you will be interesting to young people,
Also,
right?
yeah, it's true.
Yes. Great. Neela.
Yeah, I actually want to echo some points that Wendy pointed out about giving voice and listening to youth. Because youth are actually, they're a restless bunch, and they want to learn. Well, I guess I'm youth as well, so I can be quite restless as well. Yeah, they're restless, they're curious, and they do want to do something. If you talk to them, they do actually want to do something, but a lot of them say like, oh well, you know, what can I do? I'm just a small person in this big world. And I think it's because, I mean, they're not to blame, honestly. I feel like it's a two-way street. Like, yeah, they should have more agency to participate and engage in civic work, but it's also the environment that they are born into, or the environment that they have to navigate around themselves. I think oftentimes spaces aren't made for youth voice. I think the tables are always too small to include them, and sometimes it's like as if saying, oh, just wait outside for your turn, you know? Yeah, and I think I want to suggest to the crowd that like youth can contribute now. You can trust youth to give really bright ideas and innovative ideas. If only they were given a seat at the table, and not just a seat, but to actually listen intently, have intention to actually listen and give them access to these kind of spaces. And I want to suggest that, you know, I know this is a future, a panel on the future, but we exist now and we are able to contribute now. So I actually want to suggest that, like, hey, we're partners. We're not future leaders of a far-off future. We exist now, and we can become partners with all of you now. So I think environments need to be deliberately designed to include youth voice and to make us feel like, yes, you are listening. Like, it's not enough to just like maybe have a feedback form or like to include us in discussions. It helps to let us know that, yes, your points have value and you are making change in the world, even though they are small ideas. Yeah, it takes space. It takes space that is built for youth voice, and to trust them to be part of the good work. Yeah.
Great. Amna, I know you want to jump in as well.
Yeah, very quick note. So as we all know that our social realities do not fall from heaven, they are constantly produced and reproduced and constructed and reconstructed through our everyday interactions. And for those of you who are familiar with the social constructivist school of thought, they know that according to the social constructivist understanding of the self, people do not exist outside of the structures in which they live. Rather, they are mutually constitutive and co-formed. But it is their agency as actors within these structures that adds complexity to their role and that brings in change. So as a strong believer in human agency, I would say that real change begins when we believe in the power of the people, the communities.
Brilliant. And one thing that is constitutive of our identities is actually technology, right? So there's a lot of questions that have been coming in about tech, and I thought it might be useful to tackle these now because that's one aspect of what makes dealing with younger populations so unique, right? So there's a question from Jafar on what is the role of digital leadership from youth, right? And how can that play a role in shaping institutional memory and continuity within multicultural and multi-faith societies, right? So what can digital contribute to the memory and the stories that we tell? And there was another wonderful question on, let me find it. How can technology and digital innovation support youth-led efforts to build social cohesion, right? So what is the supporting sort of role that we can play? Anything you want to jump in here, Tarina or Alex?
I'd love to answer this question. Yeah. So that's exactly what we talk about at Interfaith SG. So on the first day, you actually mentioned that we are in the business of doing, and that's exactly what it's about. Interfaith SG, we are advocating for interfaith harmony through action from youth. So why involve young people? You see, we are very aware our generation is online. But in my experience, I found that real relationships need to be built in person. True common spaces are in person. And that's where youth come in. We bring color, we bring energy. I just realized now that if you're at the first row, you see my socks, they don't really match whatever the other panelists would have worn the past few days. So young people bring color. And let me give an example of this. Again, we come back to blood donation drive. Last year, we ran a blood donation drive. And again, our youths wanted to make it different. We were thinking, how do we make it different from a usual blood donation drive where it's go in, I give my blood, I get the free drinks, and I come out? Well, for our youth team, we wanted more youths to come. So we reimagined the thing as a youth carnival. There were food, games, snacks. That's how you get young people. You bring snacks. And so after they donated, they had a place where they could connect with the friends of different faiths that they had just donated blood alongside. And it was why we do this is because I wanted them, and we wanted them to receive that same message that I received when I was 16. We all bleed red, and when we unite in our differences, we can make a difference. And this goes into my point. That's why Interfaith SG also does online. We've talked a lot about why algorithms, everything, and the role that technology has in the last few days. And that's why we do social media as well. We see it as two steps. Online, we show interfaith harmony is possible, it's happening. And offline, we say, come join us at these events. And I know some of the delegates here have already fallen victim to us. You've been part of the interview on the first day, and it's actually doing great. I believe over 10,000 views. So thank you all for being part of it.
Cool. I would just add, Alex, I don't think snacks are unique just to young people. If the Cohesion Cafe outside and its popularity is anything to go by, then that's a pretty universal language out there that snacks can have, especially those biscuits with the kind of sugar icing on top, which I noticed have not been around for the last 2 days because we totally depleted the poor supplier stock after day one.
Yeah.
Great. Tarina.
Yeah, I think all of these wonderful people have said so much, and I think what I'll add is two things. One, to the question about what role do young people play in creating digital stories, digital institutions, a huge one. And so one thing that I think about is an example that I was involved in a few years ago. Some of you might be aware of the farmers' protests in India that happened a few years back. And we saw how many members of the Sikh youth diaspora were trying to find ways to get involved but didn't know how. It was also peak COVID. And so we had to be creative and think about how can we use technology, how can we use our computers, our phones to try to make an impact in some way. And so we got to work and we created this thing called the Kisan, which means farmers, youth benefit. And what we did was we brought artists from all across the world who were doing art on this issue, songs, music, young people who had things to say. We even had Bhangra, which is a Punjabi dance, performances virtually where people were sending in little Zoom videos of them dancing. And we put this all together in a program that lasted about 1.5, 2 hours. And we were able to raise upwards of $20,000 to donate to a charity that was working on preventing farmer suicides and laborer suicides in Punjab, which was a huge problem. That was one of the catalysts for the farmers' protests in connection to debt. But the point I want to make there is that young people are thinking of new strategies all of the time to try to think about what does it mean to tell those stories. And I kind of want to connect that to one of the questions asked before about what does it mean to, really engage young people and make things adaptable and relatable for them. I think a lot of it, and I'm going to echo what somebody else said, comes down to trust. I think young people have shown in so many ways that we have the ideas, that we have the passion, and I think intergenerational partnerships are vital in making sure that we're learning the lessons that the generations before us have already mastered, and at the same time, we're able to offer our energy. So I think it's about making sure that we're brought into the fold, not necessarily just as like a youth advisory council or a youth member, but having true integration into the structures of, for example, a church, a gurdwara, a mosque, making sure that young people also have a voice in how it's run and the programs that are built. And the final small thing I'll say is that, as we're trying to build these intergenerational connections, I do want to voice that it is also increasingly important for us to also understand, and this is not just unique to young people, but is particularly important for young people right now, we've grown up in the age of social media, and that's allowed us to connect, and that's allowed us to have this colorful energy. But this is also comes with a dark side, right? We see day in and day out pain and suffering through our screens. We see what it looks like to, have our neighbors and our friends from across the world experiencing what they're experiencing. We see these images, we see these pictures. And again, those pictures evoke power, but for a lot of young people, it can cause a lot of secondhand trauma. It can cause a lot of isolation. And I think somebody was talking about indifference. Sometimes that is what can cause indifference, seeing this constant bombardment of images, of traumas that lead so many young people to just kind of be numb and be like, we've seen this ever since we were 5 years old. We can't do anything, so you know what, maybe let me just stay out of it. So I think that's an important place of understanding for other generations trying to get young people involved, is trying to work with young people to, one, trust them, and one, understand that, and two, understand that there's a lot else happening that might lead to indifference. It's not just a void of care. It's just that we've kind of been bombarded with so much. So I think this is something that we all have to work on together, is the re-sparking of hope, and making sure young people and generations before us all alike understand that there is impact in what we do, and just coming at it from a place of empathy as opposed to a place of judgment as to why aren't they doing anything, why don't they care? Because I promise you, young people do care, and we've shown that in so many ways as represented by folks on this panel.
Yeah. Great. So you said a phrase, Tarina, that I want to pick up on. You talked about generations before us, right? We've been doing a lot of looking forward on this panel. Let's look back a bit as well. And I'm going to come to you first on this, right? On what the role of history is in terms of the context, the discourse, the culture that we all come from. But in particular, I want to link this to a few questions that have come in from the audience. Patrick Aung-Tu has asked, what are the main challenges of young people in engaging with authority and institutional stakeholders, right? Who are often the representatives of that history and of that accumulated past. An anonymous question has asked, what can youth do to persuade senior leaders to give them the confidence that allows them for more space, more voice and budget? And you've started to touch on this already in some of your responses, but let's go even deeper on this. How do we convince potentially skeptical folks in authority that these are not just nice things to do, but they are risks worth taking? Right? What is the discourse that we need to be part of there? And then finally, there's a wonderful question from SR here. How do you address the misconception that youth voices tend to be idealistic and uninformed of the socio-political challenges that states may face? How do we add weight to the youth voice such that it's not just good to have, but a must-have and a must-do? So Amna, maybe you can start us off on this one, because I suspect it's stuff you've thought about for a while, and then we'll come to the others if they want to jump in.
Oh, yeah, of course. Thank you for the question. And actually, recently I read a very interesting book entitled The Age of Culture, or The Cultural Age. I can't remember the exact title of the book. But this book calls for a move from the economic age to the cultural age. Of course, this is very aspiring and inspiring proposition that resonates with so many of us who have been very active in the cultural field, because we've opened doors, we've shared stories, we've empowered identities, and we've believed in the transformative power of culture. However, as hopeful as this vision may sound, I find myself always asking, where does this, or what does this cultural age bring, or perhaps even has already brought? Because as we all know, culture has never been neutral. So true, it can be used to unite, to heal, to connect, but as history has shown us, and as our current reality is showing us, culture can be used to divide, to exclude, to dominate, and even to erase. So this is why today it is more important than ever to raise awareness about the kind of discourse that is communicated about cultures. And there is one predominant theme in this conference, which is divisive politics and populism. And as someone who has done lots of research on populism, identity, and political discourse, I would like to emphasize one thing. is that although populism has been subject to extensive research, it remains a highly ambiguous and contested term. So this is why it is often associated with right-wing politics, cultural nationalism, nostalgic nationalism, or even the shrinking of the cultural capital of a particular social group. However, regardless of these controversies that are surrounding the topic of, or the concept of populism, the huge popularity of populist leaders today is primarily attributed to their claims to protect the people against threats to their social, cultural, economic, and physical security. And this is why I always emphasize that the exclusive association of populism with the long history of dissatisfaction, among those who see themselves as the losers, I would say, in the democratic process, will not lead to a thorough analysis of the ramifications that this phenomenon can have over cultural, political, social, or even economic identities. Because the quest behind the populist distinction today between the in-group and the out-group is to homogenize the people. And the notion of the people is becoming as ambiguous as the concept of populism itself. But again, the quest is to homogenize the people and set them against an antagonistic other, whether this other is social, political, economic, cultural, ethnic, racial, sexual, or even with what is happening right now around the world, I would add geopolitical. So this adds an existential dimension to policy making today that does not only draw on history, but also on the present moment, I would say. And unfortunately, as we see today, everything is taken into politics. Religion is taken into politics, personal preferences and aspirations are taken into politics, and identity issues are taken into politics as well. So making the battle no longer simply political, but also ideological and identity-based. So identity issues are becoming the new dividing lines today, making divisions even much deeper. And as we all know, if an issue is framed as existential, or if a person is framed as existential, this may lead to violent and even inhumane measures that may bring in or even lead to panic politics, which is what we are experiencing now.
Brilliant. Amna, thank you very much for that. And I want to come now to our resident storyteller and poet. Add on to what Amna's been telling us, because culture is often expressed through our stories, through our songs, through what the troubadours sing for us. What's your perspective then on how we deal with these, both relics as well as opportunities of the past?
Do you want to go first?
Sure.
Go on, Neela.
Yeah. Just touching on history and tradition. But I will also tackle the questions about authority and trusting youth.
Yeah.
History, first of all, I think a lot of youth struggle to see history as beyond, they see history as like, okay, it's a story of the past and now things are different. But there's the whole concept of like learning and unlearning that I think a lot of youth don't know how to unlearn. But I think introducing that concept in the first place would help a lot. Unlearning, it just means like reflecting and evaluating and analyzing history and seeing where the cracks lie and how we can fill in the gaps. And I think also with history, well, in Malaysia in particular, our history is very complex. And there are many different perspectives because a lot of things are uncomfortable, but that's why it's important to actually unpack these uncomfortable topics. So I feel that introducing uncomfortable things to discuss in classrooms or in really just casual spaces is important, like introducing them into a coffee meetup or something. I think, suggesting that it's okay to talk about these scary things. So I think a lot of youth are scared. A lot of youth are like, oh, I'm going to say the wrong thing, so I better not say anything. So I think giving them a prompt, prompting them to talk about difficult stuff would actually help them be more involved in history.
Cool.
On the question on authority.
Authorities, yeah.
If I may.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I can just share an example with my organization. We're all youth. But we work a lot with government. So the government, we have a lot of partnerships with ministries, and it all takes strategic planning and like knowing the right things to say sometimes. But it really is a symbiosis of like what we can provide to the government and how they can support us. So the government supports us with funds and opportunities to run programs, but we also offer research, we offer data on youth opinions and youth views. So I think that's where the trust builds. Like they need something from us, and we need something from them. So it's like a give and take kind of relationship. But it really was because they opened the doors for us. I think, yeah, you're talking about how to trust youth. It's just, I don't know, just trust them. It's like you have to. You are the person in power. You have the ability to open doors. Because youth try to open these doors, but they can't. So the key is with people in authority. I think people should just give us a chance, honestly. Yeah. It starts with just opportunity. Yeah.
There's some wonderful work done by a New Zealand academic called Bill Ryan, who says that when you're trying to innovate in large and complex systems with long and accumulated histories, you need three things. You have to have the entrepreneur and the innovator themselves, but that innovator then needs guardian angels, often someone with the key, as you just pointed out, and then they need fellow travelers who can come on the journey with them, right? We are often, I think, fellow travelers for each other at events like ICCS, but how do we then find those other fellow travelers, right? Often, those people can then become future guardian angels for others, right, as they do that work. But Wendy, let's come to you. Any thoughts on this issue of dealing with authority, dealing with vested perspectives, and how to shift them?
Right. Thank you for allowing me to gather my thoughts and going first. Yeah, so I think just to touch on the topic of like the whole history, culture context, right, and how that applies to the work that we do. So I think it's interesting because I work in a media company, and we are here to do videos that we put online on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok, and hopefully with these videos, it helps to shift perspectives, it helps to get people to understand a little bit more about the community they have around, the people that are around us. So I was just thinking like, oh, and also the other unique thing about working at where I'm working at is that actually it's about 80% young people. So a lot of them are under 30 years old as well. So whether young people care, they do care because these young people are the ones that are putting the stories out, are the ones that are sharing all these info as well. And a lot of times when we do our videos, we always ask people, or we always ask ourselves, what is something that we want people to take away from this? And you know, we are called our grandfather story, right? So definitely we take
exactly.
up... Yes.
History is in your name,
yes,
right?
history is in our name. So there is, we definitely do draw from the past. And I think even when we are researching for stories, when we're talking to people, a lot of this plays into how we see things moving forward in the future. So yeah, so that being said, when you talk about how to add weight to youth voices or how to get senior people to let young people do stuff or even authority, we don't, same as Naila, yeah, we do work with government as well. So I feel like it's important to have conversations. Yeah, I think what helps is that we have conversations and we create a space where we know that this is something that you want us to share. We know that this is something that needs to be talked about, but how can it best be presented? How can it best be told so that the wide audience will be receptive to it? So I feel that that's where trust comes in. That's where you allow us, if you want us to speak to our generation, we do know the language that they speak as well. So I feel like that's where the trust comes in. And yeah, and a lot of conversations around like how to make a piece great, how to make a video that, let's say we want to talk about certain things great as well.
Brilliant. So trust and conversations.
Yes, trust.
Right? Let's come to Tarina, and then I'll have a couple of other quick questions for the panelists before we wrap up.
Yeah, I also just wanted to add a little bit about this idea of, one, how to persuade, folks in position of authority to actually bring young people in. What would we say to them? I think, and this goes off of what Neela said, I think one, it can be in baby steps, but just say yes, take a chance. And a story I'll share about that is when back in 2020, I and a friend started a COVID initiative. It was a youth policy think tank. And so we were writing policies on the issues that were affecting us throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. So this spanned from food insecurity and trying to fill food supply chains from farm food surpluses and getting those into food insecure communities. This also included making sure that COVID testing kits were being equally distributed amongst communities of color, which we were seeing gaps of that happening. I think one thing to remember, especially when thinking about how to engage young people, is that especially on so many of these issues, we are constituents too. We face these issues, and so who else would be more informed about the issues facing us than us? So that's something I want to offer on the idea of young people being misinformed. But the second thing is, if there are pieces of the story that you think young people aren't getting, the answer isn't to shut them out, it's to bring them in and to be able to start those dialogues, have those conversations, so that these ties can continue building together and so that we can start getting somewhere even more impactful. And so I think it really is just about trying to one, take a chance, two, start forming those intergenerational conversations, and three, I would just say, it might surprise you. We were in these conversations with legislators as we were proposing policies to them. We had 60 to 70 page policy memos, and we had legislators say to us, oh, we didn't expect this from a bunch of young people. But trust us, we do the work because we care. And it might not always be that. We might miss the mark just like anybody, just like any age group. But I think it really is about that dedication to say, you know what, if we are the people that are going to be taking these positions in the future, running governments, institutions, companies, NGOs, it's important that there's involvement at the ground level so that we're not missing that intergenerational conversation and that institutional memory once we do inevitably have those positions decades into the future.
Alex, you have a quick intervention at this stage, don't you?
Yes, Aaron, no, I'm so sorry. You can answer that first. I just like to say that I need to answer this question on history. It'd be amiss if I didn't answer the question on history.
All right, go on.
So please allow me to stand because I'm really passionate about history.
Okay.
A history major. So when we look at Singapore's history, we see that our forefathers laid the foundations for what we have here in Singapore. What we have today, don't ever make the mistake of thinking that it happened by chance. And when we look at it, it was very intentionally done by the previous generations. We often use this metaphor, our forefathers laid the foundations, but it also begs the question, what are we doing today? If 60 years on we are still laying foundations, then we've missed something. We need to be doing something different. So to answer the question, I see history that it shows us how intentional it was in the past, and it invites us to be intentional today. When we look at that generation that built Singapore and the generation that built many other nations around the world, we often look to the greatest generation. This is a generation that lived through the wars. This is a generation that left behind a legacy of courage, sacrifice, bravery, and they are the ones that we respect today. But it also begs the question for me, what legacy is our generation going to leave behind? Are we going to leave behind more stories of just surviving wars, negotiating peace? I believe that we can be the greatest generation 2.0, that we are not remembered just for the wars fought, but we are remembered for the wars that we prevented, that we are not remembered just for surviving hardship, but we can be remembered for thriving through harmony, that the stories that we leave behind are of peace, understanding, and unity. And I truly believe that this is possible for our generation. But it begs the question, what are we going to do today to be intentional? So from my learning, I want to share this. Don't wait for headlines to take action. Don't just wait for crises to build friendships, but do it today. Build harmony today. Build real relationships with everyone of different faiths, of different cultures today. Thank you. Thank you for letting me answer this.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to be passionate about this.
Absolutely. See, I would have called it the greatest generation. So this is why you are the social media expert rather than me. I have one last thought that I'd like to invite from all of you. Right? Earlier this morning, Venerable Napan said that you have to stand up, speak up, and then time is also up, right? Towards the end. So you've stood up now, Alex. Time is almost up. So in no more than a minute for each of you, could you share with us what you want this group to not forget from this panel? Right? What's the one thing? We're all forgetful. Many of us have minds like sieves. What do you want us to make sure we don't forget? For our friends doing the visual graphic recording, this is the stuff you really want to make sure you hear because it'll go wonderfully on your summary. But one key takeaway from each of you. And let's just go down the row here. Wendy, we'll start with you.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, okay, so I feel one thing that if there's one thing you can take away, it is what language do you speak? So I feel like there is, or rather for us to ask ourselves, what language do we speak? So for me, I shared just now that it was a little bit, I connect with humor. For some people, as we have evidently known, is food. Like we all love to eat here.
Absolutely.
There is food, there is faith, there is music, there is so many different languages. And if we find that common language I feel like we can find that way to connect with people. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. So language.
Yeah.
Neela.
Okay, I actually want to talk to two different segments of the crowd. So there are people here.
But you only have a minute. So.
Yes, I will try my best. Yes. Yeah, for those working in civil society, I know it's like, yeah, myself, it's hard. It's like hard to be motivated. But I think I want to offer, you know, we can't hold on to the good stuff and the good successes only to sustain the work that we do. I think we need to move together with the gut of the work where things are really tough, you know. I think that's where the excitement actually lies. And for the rest of the crowd and people in power, really, I think the biggest takeaway from this conversation is to trust in youth, because we can bring a lot of, not just new things, but just to support whatever that you have to offer to us. And I feel like youth are always open to like collaborate, like just open the doors because you have the key. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Neela.
Right. One thing I've learned from doing interfaith work is this: relationships transcend religion. And that's why I truly believe that real relationships are the most important thing. You know, after ICCS ends today, after YLP ends on Saturday, don't just take away all the selfies you took. Don't just take away the new followers on Instagram. Don't just take away the new connections on LinkedIn. But build real relationships with these people. I'm so glad that even before this panel, Aaron is saying, let's connect, let's do something after this. You've also invited me for the Parliaments of the World, and I can't wait for all these real relationships. And you see, when I talk about being intentional, it's about building real relationships. Build real relationships every day, not just in the conference, but in everything that we do. And that's how I truly believe we can be the greatest generation 2.0.
Thank you, Alex. Amna.
Yeah, actually, my major takeaway is inspired by the President's opening speech during the first day of this conference, which emphasized a key concept to me, which is education. And in today's conflict-driven and fragmented world, nothing more important than education. And by education, I don't only mean the formal learning that we receive at schools and universities, but the kind of learning that we undertake ourselves, our commitment to broaden our perspectives and to be inclusive of diverse viewpoints and worldviews, and to be able to take off our limited cultural glasses, to be able to see, value, and accept those who are different from us for who they truly are. Thank
Brilliant.
you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Tarina, you get the last word amongst the speakers.
Alex, I'm taking a page out of your book. But my takeaway is this. Cohesion is a movement, and cohesion is discipline. The movement is here. All of us have different strategies, different tactics. Some of us, it's advocacy. Some of us, it's policy. Some of us, it's research. Some of us, it's nonprofit work. But don't take for granted the small moments, not just the flashy ones, not just the grand gestures, but the conversations you're having at your table today, the conversations you're having at the Cohesion Cafe, the times that you're sharing social media to continue the conversation. And secondly, cohesion is discipline. We all do this work. We all know this. But what I want to offer is this. It comes day in and it comes day out. It comes when we wake up in the morning overwhelmed by what's happening in the world, and we still decide to do this work no matter what because we believe in it. And so the last thing I want to say is that we can do it. We can do it. We are here because we believe in the possibility of cohesion. We believe that that can be what rules the world, and it will be what rules the world if we all keep doing what we're doing.
Thank you so much to all five of you. That truly was an amazing panel. We covered so much ground. We covered history, we looked to the past, we looked to the future, we looked at how we manage the complexities of today. Usually at this stage, the moderator tries to do a summary of some sort. I'm not going to do that because I think there's no way to do justice to the range of what you've all covered. But I will do this. I will say that we covered a lot of the fundamentals that's involved in social cohesion, diversity, and multiculturalism work. And what you all kept reminding me of is certain key words that are in that fundamentals. We often say that the fundamentals are expressed in the ABCs of something, right? You made me think of so many ABCs, actually. So in 58 seconds, what I'm going to do is tell you all the words in the alphabet that they reminded me of today. Because I think there'll be words that will ring throughout our memory as we go through the rest of today's program and post-ICCS. So A is for Amna and Alex, of course. Who are the Amnas and Alexes of the future? And will they have the agility to kind of ride the momentum of the work that we're trying to do? B is for the boundaries we're trying to manage, the bridges we try to build, and the fact that blood is red, fundamentally. C is for care and the connection and the conversations that we need to build. D is the fact that this is doing work, not just thinking work, not just abstract work, but about going there and doing stuff. E is for the ethics and the values that drive the work. F is for friendship and the fun in the work that we can find if we know how to look for it. G is for gracias and thank you, and the things that we say to express gratitude to one another, because gratitude comes from the word grace, and that really is an attitude that we need to bring so much more into this work. H is for the history we need to learn from. I is for the idealism that will help us to temper our identities and ideologies, and it's also for intergenerational, to remember that this work transcends age. J is for the joy that the work can bring as we go on the journey that we're on. K is for the kinship that we need to have amongst all of us. L is for the lived experiences that are the fundamental bedrock of all of this work, and the language that we have to learn how to speak. M is for the moral imperative and the movement building that we have to do. N, definitely for Nila, of course, but also for the balance between new and old, and bringing in of the non-profit sector, to not forget that they have a really important role in this work. O is for the omissions that we must remember are out there and try and rectify, but also the opportunities that we need to deal with. P is for power and the reality that it provides here, that this work is political, but there are ways to harness power and politics for positive effects. Q is for the quintessential uniqueness of each person, as we saw so well exemplified, amongst all of you. R is for relationships, which I think is probably the most frequently said word amongst all 5 of you today. S is for stories, for standing up, and for snacks, right? Those universal and fundamental tools that we need in this work. T is for Tarina, definitely, but also for toughness and also for trust, right? In the kind of work that we're trying to build today. U is for understanding and the unlearning that we have to do to get to that understanding. V is for the values and virtues that multiculturalism can bring for us if we know how to mine them. W, you probably have guessed this, is for Wendy, but also for the power that women have in this role, and that the allies of women like Alex also have to play in this effort. X is for the xenophobia that's out there. We can't wish it away, but knowing it's there helps us to deal with the fact that it's there and to find ways to solve it. Y is for you and me, because fundamentally it's going to be about us getting involved in this work. And Z, this was very hard, but you all struck me as zeroing in a lot on the details of this work, but also knowing how to zoom out when necessary and keep the big picture in mind. So thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Maniam. How's that for a wrap? May I please invite you to step forward for a group photo, please. Ladies and gentlemen, can we show them how much we appreciate, at the very least, their energy? Thank you. And Dr. Maniam, whatever you are teaching, I'm attending that course, okay? You sound like a great teacher. Thank you all.
I think I'm going to give Aaron 2 A's as well. The angelic academic. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to sit around the stage, but really, the youths that we whom we spoke, whom we learned from, and I said learned intentionally, because I think that they are inspiring, because I'm quite sure that there are quite a few, more than myself included, jaded souls in this room. And whenever I come into contact with young people, it is their energy that inspires us. A few people mentioned people in power. It was mentioned quite a few times that those people in power, the older people are in power. And I thought it was ironic because the only people who are really in power are the youths themselves, because they are the future. I mean, these people in power are not going to live forever, So we thank you for your ideas, your perspectives, and your sharing.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's been, yes, I think they deserve another round of applause for the youth community leaders indeed. I speak for Diana and I when I say it's been a very meaningful 3 days. We certainly hope you had a lot to contribute to the conference, as well as take back as you go onwards to your travels. But ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I take pride in inviting up our Minister for Law and Second Minister for Home Affairs, Minister Edwin Tong, with his keynote address. Ladies and gentlemen, with pride, Minister Edwin Tong.
Good afternoon, everyone, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and especially a warm welcome to all our friends, visitors from overseas. I hope you had a good stay in Singapore, and we are so thrilled, so honored that you are back here again, joining us for ICCS 2025. I think we should give all our friends from overseas a really warm round of applause. And so here we are. 3 fruitful days have just flown by, and today, now, all too soon, we are at the close of the 3rd edition of ICCS. A little bit bittersweet because we've had a great 3 days, but as with all good things, it comes to an end. Actually, it is not an end. It is just the beginning. It is the beginning of building on the friendships and the networks that you've formed here, the knowledge that you've exchanged, what you can do when you bring it back to your home countries, in your own communities, what you can do to expand on the learning and the thought leadership that we've developed here, and how much more we can impact community and touch people's lives. All of that, I believe, starts at ICCS, in the conversations that you've had, in the plenary sessions that you've enjoyed, and in the thoughtful speeches that we've heard. So I hope that we can go back there and make this just the start of impact on all of our communities, wherever we come from. Since the last conference, just 3 years ago, I think the world has become a more uncertain place, and dare I say, a more fragile place. We have seen the rise of conflicts. Sometimes they are simmering conflicts, sometimes they erupt violently, sadly, but violently. Trade tensions have disrupted economies. Digital disinformation has spread rapidly across borders at breakneck speed, and even faster with each iteration of the social media and technology. And social fissures deepen within and between nations. Sometimes people take very emotive fault lines because they are the weakest link in society, and they press them hard, and they use those as weapons. So the challenge to peace and harmony, I think, is real. It is pressing. Yet, despite all of this, the fact that standing up here today, and I see all of you present, ICCS's strong showing this year, our many thought-provoking speeches, the engaging, the lively plenary sessions, and more importantly, all the networks that you've built and enhanced, all of this demonstrates our collective determination that despite what is happening around the world, despite the conflicts that we see, and despite the tensions and fault lines that people take advantage of, we are here determined not just to talk about the difficulties, but to find ways to act on them. Not merely to coexist or even just to be content with being tolerant of differences, but to build genuine bonds across these differences and to seek to celebrate diversity as a virtue amongst all of us. And it shows indeed that we are committed to nurturing cohesive societies as the foundation of resilient futures. One theme that has reverberated throughout almost every keynote, every address that we've heard, and I heard that earlier in the lively exchange, is that cohesion does not happen by chance. It will not, it cannot, and I think we have to assume that we have to work really hard at doing it, which means that cohesion demands intentionality. It must be deliberate, it must be front of mind, it must be something we are conscious of, and we must organize ourselves around it. And it requires what I call intentional multiculturalism, something that's not left to chance, cannot be built by chance. Let me explain a little bit more what I mean by sketching out what social cohesion means to me personally, sharing some of the Singapore experience, and also drawing on the very many thoughtful speeches that I've heard over the last few days. Social cohesion, we've heard that word so many times, to me means something that knits a diverse society into a shared community. And as I said, it doesn't exist as a natural state. In fact, our most primal instincts tell us to look for people who are similar to us. We hang out with people who look like us, speak like us, share our beliefs, and basically are a reflection of ourselves in identity and fundamentally in our thought process. And so, therefore, you can't assume that when you leave a country alone, you leave a society alone, you leave a community to chance that something cohesive will materialize, especially when you have a diverse group of people with different interests, different faiths, different backgrounds. We must work very hard at it, and this is painstaking work, and I think we all know there can be no substitute. But if we get it right, we can build shared norms with common hopes and aspirations, and be in a position to create an environment where people don't just tolerate one another, but we embrace one another. We truly live, we interact, and we deepen friendships across communities in everyday life. And I want to emphasize the key is in everyday life. It is actually quite easy to do it on special occasions, on festivals, on the New Year occasions where things are fun. You get to dress up in baju, in nice clothes, you visit. That's the easy part. But can we do it and sustain it every day, day in, day out, whether there's a special occasion or otherwise? And I believe that this year's theme, Cohesive Societies, Resilient Futures, really captures this essence very aptly, because it's in a cohesive society that we will find a resilient future. At the same time, true cohesion and societal harmony cannot be the product of a single silver bullet. Why not? Well, very simply put, we are dealing with individuals. We are dealing with emotions, with beliefs, with sentiments. We are dealing with people who come from different heritage, a different sense of cultural norms, and a lot of deep history. It is also multifaceted because no two communities can ever be alike. It is also constantly evolving across different generations. And earlier on, we heard one of the speakers here speak about intergenerational communication. And I think that's really important as a foundational touch point of building true cohesion. Cohesion also touches on the deepest identities and beliefs that people hold dear. And this is really very visceral, very personal, something that we hold deep and true to our very second nature of our identity. Indeed, many speakers over the last 3 days have reminded us that managing this diversity and being able to stitch it into a cohesive unit is very complicated. It involves navigating differences that are often deeply rooted, as I said, in history, culture, and faith. And we're also reminded that at the core of a cohesive society or a community, we speak of society and community as a collective plural. But actually, what we're talking about is an individual. At the core of every society we want to bring together, every community, are people like you and I. People with their own hopes, their own fears, their own dreams, their own aspirations. So even as we address macro issues, which are important, policies and platforms that promote cohesion, we can ill afford to ignore the micro, the thoughts, the sentiments, the individuality behind what we want to do. And we have to try and learn to see issues through the lens of the other person. And more importantly, in a diverse community, through the lens of the minority community. It is easy to see it through the lens of the majority community. But can we ask ourselves every once in a while to look at a perspective, look at an issue from the lens of someone who fits within the minority profile of any particular community? And I would say that if we can do that, then we have the best possible chance of shaping the lived experience of that individual, which matters a great deal. What they feel, how they see, how they feel valued in the community, the role they play, the role they can play, how they're looked up to, all of that are very important constituent elements to building a socially cohesive society. And therefore, spaces, daily rituals, things that we do on a daily basis, as I said, outside of special occasions, that foster interaction and build understanding, they are really important. As are programs that are organized in a community that deliberately bring people together through platforms that are otherwise very innocuous looking, arts, heritage, culture, sports. All of these are platforms that bring people together with no other agenda. But through the natural formation of teams, of friendship, of communities, you learn to bridge gaps, you learn to see across divides using these platforms. Or even if you ignore the platforms, what about the spontaneous occasions, the shared coffee breaks, which I'm sure you had many of, the neighborhood festivals, or just bumping into someone while you're walking your dog in the park, or bringing your children to the playground? All these micro interactions are really important and cannot be ignored as we strive to build a socially cohesive society. And the point I want to leave you with, I heard just now Dr. Maniam say, what is the one point you won't forget? Well, my one point is this: there is no one size fits all. It is different, and we must respect the differences, and we must see through the collective whole and identify the individual in order to build a socially cohesive community. This year's conference takes place in a special year for Singapore. We are celebrating our 60th year of independence. It is a real milestone in our nation's journey to build a cohesive, multicultural society. But at the same time, it is also an opportunity for all of us, in Singapore especially, to reflect on that journey, to ask ourselves how we have come here, how far we have come, what more we can do to make it SG 100 and beyond, and what are the steps we need to take as a society collectively to be on that path. I believe that multiculturalism lies at the heart of the Singapore story. 60 years ago, as a newly independent nation with a highly diverse population, we were very conscious of our differences. But we decided to form the country that embraced the differences, not in spite of, but because of the differences, to make ourselves stronger. We consciously adopted multiculturalism as a key core value that we would live by. Some of our rules, our laws, our constitution have provisions that deal with what we do, how we treat a minority population in our country. And so we became an independent nation of people with very different ethnicities, religion, cultural practices. And we decided that we would not build a national identity by assimilating all of these into one, but we wanted to keep those individual intrinsic qualities of diversity, different communities and having different characteristics, and we layer on top of that our national identity. So it is a Singaporean identity, but below that we respect, we embrace, and we have learned to truly appreciate the differences that exist below the surface as a fellow Singaporean. And so we grow this thinking throughout what we have done in our policies and in our practices. It is to integrate the groups to help them to live closer together, and as a result, I believe Singapore has become home to a real kaleidoscope of different ethnicities, religions, languages, and I'm so proud to call this my home. But the question for us is, as an international community, how do we keep this going? With the challenges that we've heard, many speeches have touched on it earlier this week. How do we navigate these challenges? How do we evolve the concept of multiculturalism to take on board today's challenges, the tensions that lie today, with the advent of social media and powered by technology? Well, I've got a couple of short observations to share with you. First, I believe we must always work on a basis, as I started by saying, and I'm sorry I keep repeating myself, but such an important point, that multiculturalism is not a natural state. It is never assured, and we have to work hard at it. And we must always assume it to be a constant work in progress, and something that we are ever so anxious about that we might lose. We must always glance behind us, behind our backs, and wonder whether it could be taken away from us. And we must always have that slight nervousness about it, and then we will seek to really jealously guard it and protect it. Second, I believe we need leadership and citizen support in tandem, hand in hand. It can't be one without the other. No policy alone will ever work, and no community without policy and frameworks can work. Government policies are useful, and they put in place the framework, but it has to be the people who breathe life into these ideals, who practice them every day, and as I said, show us what their lived experience is. And on this, I believe we will have to accept a degree of social intervention. that social intervention can be quite deeply personal. You've heard some of the stories, and I don't want to repeat it, but you heard what I think my colleague Dinesh spoke about, how we integrated living spaces. Why? Not because we wanted to make people live together or have to transact in a particular way, but because when you live together, you grow up together, the children play together, you eat together at hawker centers, side by side, elbow to elbow, at a shared space, at a common table. And you learn to see across the divides. You learn that that is your lived experience. That is what I mean by everyday, day-to-day lived experience, not just on special occasions. So that social intervention can be quite deeply personal, where we live, how we live, all of that existing within a policy framework to maintain harmony within a community. And I think that's really important. Third, in public spaces, both offline as well as online, I think there has to be responsibility and accountability for what we say. Sometimes the most divided of conflicts starts with mere words. Pope Leo, when he was first elected, after the conclave, he had a dialogue with, I believe it was all the ambassadors, the diplomatic enclave. And amongst his first speeches, the one phrase that struck a chord with me was this. He said, and I quote, "For words too, not only weapons, can wound and even kill." And when I had a brief opportunity to chat with him, when I met with him at the Vatican, he said, many conflicts today start with just a disagreement by words. And it quickly escalates into something that becomes an armed conflict, and sometimes you can see it becomes prolonged. So I believe we could all be a lot more mindful and have a care about what we say, in particular about hateful speech. Sometimes this will mean sacrificing our own desire to be able to say what we want about anything we want, wherever we want, in favor of being more sensitive and caring about the impact this can have on the person next to us. And if you go back a few minutes ago when I said, what happens when you walk into a room where you are not the majority in that room and your views are not taken into account and speeches are made or comments are made that denigrates the minority? That's hurtful. That's how sometimes conflicts can start. This, I believe, if we are more mindful, will lead to a more open, honest public discourse based on facts and not hate and not disinformation. Fourth point, the responsibility to shape and nurture this cohesive society, the society of the future, will increasingly fall on the shoulders of our young people, our young leaders, our young advocates. And I think Alex just now demonstrated what it meant to him, because he literally stood up to be counted. And I think that's what we need our young people to do. At ICCS, this year, I'm delighted to see over 200 young leaders joining us, nearly double from the previous conference. And I think this is a very significant factoid from this ICCS, that we have more youthful participation, more of our young people are engaged, more people have signed up for the YLP, which, by the way, goes on till this Saturday. And I want to give you all a very big shout out. Thank you very much for being here and for taking the lead. And more importantly, you're not just here to be participants. You've been actively working with us to co-create this program, to think what would matter, how would we deliver the message, how do we design the sessions. And many of you have led conversations. You've given us your perspective, your views, and led those conversations. You've had a critical role in shaping future conversations as well. And as I heard earlier just now, and was a point that I wanted to make quite deliberately in my speech, you play a big role in being able to shape and build that intergenerational dialogue, that intergenerational bonding. Because it's one thing to connect with people of your own generation, but it's much harder to do so across different generations. And trust me, one day you will get there when you are the senior generation and you think, what is this music that they're listening to? What is this language that they're speaking? I don't understand it. I look it up at Google and it doesn't really help me. So I use my children to help me translate. But one day you will be there. So that intergenerational bonding and the cohesion is equally important. I want to just cite, while I'm here, some inspiring examples from the ICCS alumni, from our young people. So I'm told that Edwin from Malaysia founded Jelajah Harmony Sebarang Jaya. It's a youth-led initiative bringing participants to visit multiple different places of worship, understanding what goes on in a place of worship that is not of your own religion, your own faith, fostering a first-hand appreciation of this diversity, and in many ways playing a very important role to demystify. Very often you are worried and anxious about something you don't know, you don't understand. So the first step to harmony and cohesion is to understand, to see, to know, and then understand, and it breaks that barrier. How many of us will be able to criticize a friend from a minority, even if that person is from the minority? Because that person is someone you know well, you hold dear to, you understand, you know, you speak to this person, you understand his or her challenges. It is much harder to do so. So it is always better to start with understanding, and I think the efforts that Edwin has made has played a big part in shaping this. And also from the Philippines, and she's been with us several years now, Arisa Nokam from the Philippines created Champions for Peace, helping to train youths to address social and environmental fragilities in their own communities. I think this is, it's a challenge to do so because it's never easy to look at social and environmental issues, but to look at it across the religious divide, across the different ethnicities as well, and to develop thought leadership around it, to rally, to lead. All of these are really great examples of how our young people from ICCS, in the alumni, have done us so proud. And I thank all of you for being here, for taking the lead, and for really carrying on with this messaging even outside of the ICCS. These stories underscore the power of our young people to transform societies from the ground up. And in your hands, I believe you have the power to be able to transcend those conversations and to build stronger thought leadership that leads us into the future of cohesive societies. Finally, my last thought on this: how do we approach cohesion building? I mean, we speak about this in theory, we understand what a cohesive society looks like, but how do you and I play a part in doing this? How do we all approach these conversations if and when we are approached? I believe that our approach must always be with an open heart, always prepared to see across differences, willing to foster shared ideas and build hopes with people who might look, think, speak differently from ourselves. I spent almost 5 years in my previous role as the Minister for Culture, Community and Youth. 5, to me, very, very fulfilling years. And this part of the work has been deeply personal for me. In a world that is increasingly shaped by polarization, by division, where we see value, tremendous value in building civic spaces, both online and offline, where dialogues can take root across faiths, sectors, across different generations, across different ethnicities, and through that to build trust. And one more thing, we should never weaponize race and religion. We should never do that. It's so easy to do, but its impact is so long-lasting and it breaks the trust that we all seek to foster. And to me, this is why ICCS matters. We come together as an open community, we share ideas, we develop a common resolve to do better in each of our own communities. It also helps us to sharpen our instinct, to listen more carefully, to collaborate more deeply, and to reach beyond just the familiar. Because today's world is not just defined by geographical boundaries. It is a global village connected by technology and trade, and yet, sadly, very often divided by suspicion and fear. So we must find a way, even as we part company after today, to go back to our own communities and have that shared thought leadership on how we build a cohesive society across the world. Finally, in closing, as I reflect on Singapore's 60 years and ICCS's growth, I return to a few what I regard as simple truths. Cohesion and harmony, they are not abstract ideals. They are tangible, very tangible objectives. They are lived commitments. They are made in everyday choices. Like I said, every day, day in, day out, where we work, live, and play. Cohesion and harmony is also forged in the willingness to listen, to understand, and that open heart to reach across divides. They're built in spaces, both big and small, from national policies to neighborhood conversations, and as I said, from grand celebrations to the smallest acts of kindness for your neighbor as you see him or her at the lift lobby or at the corridor where you live. But they do require courage, patience, and above all, I believe, a certain intentionality and deliberateness to what we want to foster. I'm pleased to say that at ICCS 2025, we have witnessed this spirit. Together, we have shared stories, we have shared ideas, and we have discussed solutions. And now, as we go back to our own communities, our own countries, our continents, I hope that we can carry this spirit with us. May we all be inspired to work actively and intentionally across multicultural societies where difference and diversity is a strength and not a threat, where every individual's identity is respected and every person's voice is heard. And then cohesion can become the bedrock of resilient futures for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister.
Ladies and gentlemen, now with that, just before we come to the end of the conference, we'd like to ask you to give your attention to the screens in front of you, because right now we'll have a closing video giving you or featuring highlights of ICCS 2025. Enjoy.
Cohesive societies can only be sustained and their diversity remain a strength if people have shared hopes and a shared purpose and sense of shared endeavor.
Navigating these uncharted waters demands resilience and reinvention. But most importantly, it will take collaboration and collective courage. I believe a core foundation of social cohesion is simply to be a good neighbor.
To move towards one where we are not just tightly banded together, but we are closely blended. At the end of the day, we are a blend of multiple cultures, ethnicities, religions. And the social glue that keeps us together and to build societal resilience is really a forged sense of solidarity.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And might I say that applause is for yourselves. That look back reminds me that there has been so many ideas, so much energy, and I know a lot of commitment over the last 3 days. It leaves me now to invite you all outside to the foyer for one last mingle. Can't promise there will be snacks, but definitely there will be drinks.
And as you make your way out, ladies and gentlemen, in our efforts of promoting sustainability, we'd like to invite you to drop your lanyards and your badges at the registration counters on the outside. Yep. And of course, we'd like to hear from you. I've been saying this throughout the entire conference. We're going to put up the QR code one last time right now. And if you haven't already done so, we'd like to hear from you. Only reason for this is to make sure that you have even more meaningful sessions with us at the ICCS conferences for years to come. Having said so, ladies and gentlemen, we've had very meaningful conversations. Please, we'd like to keep these conversations alive because this is so important for our world going forward. On behalf of Diana and I would like to say thank you for being right here in Singapore. For those of you traveling back to your countries, have safe travels. For those of you planning to stay in Singapore just a tad bit longer, enjoy what the island has to offer. This is Ravi and Diana on behalf of ICCS and its organizing committee saying thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good evening. Thank you.